Hello and welcome to SAE Tomorrow Today. I am your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, I spoke with Chuck Price, Chief Product Officer at TuSimple, about what the company has learned after collecting 5.5 million miles of on-road data and how it's informing the company's approach to safety, road conditions, and AI system training. TuSimple's game-changing autonomous technology is allowing companies to network and transform how they move freight through the autonomous freight network. With an ecosystem of industry-leading partners including DHL, Goodyear, Penske, McLean, and the United States Postal Service, coupled with a laser focus on trucking, the use of camera-driven perception systems, and real-world data, TuSimple is leading the way towards a self-driving infrastructure that enables greater efficiencies and lower operational costs for transporters and consumers. We hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the podcast, Chuck.
Thanks for having me, Grayson.
I'm super excited to have you here. TuSimple is a fascinating company because not only are you building autonomous trucks, you're also building the AFN network, which for our listeners is the Autonomous Freight Network. So I can't wait to dive in for you to tell the story of TuSimple and how you're deploying autonomous trucks on the nation's highways.
I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Chuck, to kick things off, how would you describe TuSimple's approach to autonomous trucking?
We started focused on autonomous trucks. We were never distracted by other autonomy avenues. Our entire focus has been building a sustainable business to move commercial freight autonomously.
Why never deviate, as other competitors have, into cars or other automation? That's been, I think, one of the unique things about TuSimple. Been laser focused on trucking. Why is that, and why does the company continue to stay laser focused on trucking?
In 2015, when we were founded, we looked very hard at where the opportunities were for autonomy. We felt that while cars are interesting and a large sort of market theoretically to exploit millions and millions of cars on the road, we felt that the economic drivers weren't sufficiently concentrated to motivate a major investment in automating. We looked at trucking and determined that the economics are sufficiently concentrated. There's an urgent need for this kind of technology in trucking, and there's a real opportunity to provide a solution that provides very strong economic benefit and a very strong return, achievable return for a company like ours in a realistic time frame. So that drove our decision to never look at cars, to only focus on trucks.
It was a wise decision. The other thing, before I get to the supply chain, that the company's been very uniquely positioned about is you've always been focused on revenue generating partnerships and deployments, not pilots. Why was the decision made to always focus on revenue and deployments that are scalable and not a 3-week pilot, a 4-week pilot, a 5-week pilot?
You know, we're a technology company, but unlike the typical technology startup, our goal was to build a sustainable business. So we focused on what are the things you have to do to make this a real business. A pilot is an important stepping stone in a relationship with any partner, with any customer. If you're asking them to make a substantial investment, they'll say, well, prove yourself first. So of course pilots have a role, but pilots aren't the end game unless your goal is to just build value and sell your technology company, which is sort of the typical pattern in Silicon Valley. In our case, we did not have that as a goal. We had as a goal to build a long-term sustainable business. So we did do pilots 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in order to establish relationships. But then we converted those relationships into long-term contractual businesses. So we've done that multiple times now, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of them.
And to highlight it, one of your customers, UPS. Everybody knows UPS. They're at your door delivering packages you order online, and now you're hauling autonomously for UPS. How would you describe the relationship between TuSimple and UPS?
It's a very strong relationship, and as you may know, they are also an investor in the company. So that disclaimer aside, we started our relationship with UPS, with them being extremely doubtful that this technology would ever, come to bear. And so we started with small demonstrations to establish proof points, and then a pilot to prove that we knew what we were doing. We converted that at least 2 years ago now into a long-term contractual relationship, so that we now run lanes as a business. They depend on us to run these lanes. So this is a long-term contract. We've now done 160,000 miles autonomously with them. By the time this is broadcast, it will be substantially more than that, but that's the number that we've announced publicly. So we have moved on largely from pilots into establishing commercial relationships with carriers. If another carrier is interested in us, we point to the work we're already doing and saying, hey, do you want to do this too? We don't have to do a pilot anymore in order to prove that. We've already done that work. So pilots, for a large extent, pilots are well behind us. Now, we will do pilots in the future for when we introduce new levels of autonomy, new milestones in this path. But for the most part, we're not in the business to do pilots. We're in the business to sign contracts, generate revenue. It's a long-term sustainable business.
Simply put, you're a business. You said it. TuSimple's a business. It's not a science project, which is a big meaningful thing. I want to point out on the UPS, because this statistic is really important, a 13% fuel savings. That is a positive benefit on the environment. How is your system able to achieve such a dramatic fuel savings? From the economic standpoint, for UPS, that's a lot of money saved, but from an environmental standpoint, that's really, really positive.
That's correct. And there are a number of technical reasons why we can achieve dramatic savings. First, we operate the vehicle, the virtual driver operates the vehicle the way the manufacturer intended it to be operated. We don't do jackrabbit starts. We don't do hard stops. So one of the goals of the virtual driver is to keep the mass moving as much as possible at a constant speed. That minimizes the energy that you're having to waste in accelerating and decelerating. For a lot of drivers, the gas pedal is a binary switch. It's either all the way on or all the way off, and that's not efficient. So we have very, very efficient longitudinal control of the vehicle system. But we also have very strong, very accurate control laterally. If you follow a truck down the highway, you'll notice that the trailer, the back of the trailer, is fishtailing constantly back and forth as the driver struggles to maintain the center line in the lane. It's a very difficult task to keep that truck going straight. Our system is operating as if the vehicle is on rails. So there's very little lateral movement, which does save a substantial amount in fuel over hundreds of miles. We also minimize tire wear, which is another savings that folks don't talk about. But you eliminate scrub, or at least minimize scrub of tires when you're not fishtailing around. So those improvements in the driving system showed savings. Now, we did a study with UCSD, University of California, San Diego, and they found that in theory, we should save 10%. We thought that was a great number in aggregate. So they did a year-long study to come up with this number. And then when we were in practice with UPS, we discovered that, in fact, it's even better. It's 13%. So we're pleasantly surprised at our ability to go beyond what the theory said we should be able to hit. And we think we'll see more and more as we combine with the OEM to build very efficient vehicles from the outset. The base vehicle system itself also will be optimized.
What role do cameras play in helping your system be the perfect driver?
So this was one of the advantages we have of deciding at the beginning that we're focusing on trucking. So we looked at the hard problems that need to be solved with trucks. And one of the hardest is the trucks operate at high rates of speed, 65 miles an hour, 75 miles an hour. These are not city vehicles. These are highway vehicles. That requires longer range. So we looked at the existing sensor systems that autonomous vehicle companies were leveraging, and we found that the primary system is LiDAR. LiDAR is a great sensor. It allows you to see actively, meaning you're providing your own light in order to detect the object. But it comes with limitations. It has shorter range, which doesn't allow you to operate at full highway speeds. Now, advancements are happening all the time, and we expect LiDAR producers to have longer range LiDAR, but there are limits to LiDAR involved with eye safety. So that, among other factors, led us to, at the outset, say, well, what about cameras? We happen to have core expertise in our founders in vision and AI with cameras. So we said, well, let's leverage that as our sort of go-to-market primary sensor. Now, we use all sensors available. We are an information-rich perception system, but cameras give us the longest possible range. We perceive at 1,000 meters, over half a mile, which is twice as long as professional drivers are taught to see in order to make decisions. So this allows us not only safety and a very high confidence in perception in the mid-range, but also gives us efficiency advantages. We can see long ahead what's happening in the lane, and that allows us to make efficiency decisions in addition to giving us very high confidence in our perception at the mid-range, which is where the safety decisions have to be made in the quarter-mile distance.
From a safety perspective, I read an interview that you did with Jim Adler in FreightWays where you talked about, quote unquote, a swarm of cars that were coming like bees out of the honey pot, swarming the truck. And the truck stopped, saved everybody's life, and it was a human driver. Somebody could have perished. Was it the cameras that allowed that safety system to kick in to identify those swarm of cars coming and say, wait a second, this is not normal. This is not a safe environment. Was it the cameras that allowed that to happen?
It was a combination. The cameras, of course, played a critical role because we have a 360-degree view with cameras. But we also fuse in LiDAR and radar into our solution, and ultrasonics if you get close enough to the vehicle. But the fused result gives us immediate feedback into proximity. As vehicles get closer, more sensors have the ability to touch that vehicle. So it gives us just more and more accuracy. We have a certain degree of accuracy with cameras. When we add LiDAR to the solution, we get higher positional accuracy. Radar gives us confidence amongst those sensors and also gives us inclement weather condition solutions. So the combination really gives us the highest level of confidence, with cameras as the forward guard, if you will. We see vehicles first with cameras. When this swarm happened, it was during a time when we were doing a critical maneuver. We were on a surface street turning into a narrow driveway, and that requires the truck to do what some call a J-hook turn, meaning you have to turn towards the left in order to turn to the right. And the cars that swarmed us passed us illegally on both sides of the vehicle during that maneuver. Of course, the vehicle, as the cars were approaching, was applying brakes, it was signaling, it was doing all of the maneuvers required, but it had to factor in cars that were coming in from both sides, around both sides of the vehicle. And it did safely navigate that very bad situation.
Is it fair to say that autonomous trucks are making the road safer for not just the individuals that are driving the truck, but for everybody on the road today? Because your system is predicting all of these various incidents that could happen that a human might not be able to predict, or they might be distracted?
There's no question that an autonomous truck is a safer system on the road than a human-driven truck for a variety of technical reasons. Of course, it's not sleeping, not drinking and driving, it's not texting, so it's not distracted in those very distinctly human ways. But also, it's not scanning. Instead, it's developing a constant 360-degree view around the vehicle. It's not having to scan individual sectors separately. So if the human driver is looking in the passenger side mirror to see if somebody's coming along from the right, that driver could miss an incident that's developing on the left. We see it all. We see it all in close range and in distant range, and can make decisions based on the totality of the situation, which makes the vehicle system safer. So the question, it really isn't a question of, is an autonomous truck safer than a human? It undoubtedly is. The question is, can the autonomous system behave properly in the face of a world filled with unsafe human drivers? And that's really the challenge that we're solving. Lane keeping and adaptive cruise control, those are simple problems to solve. The hard problems are, how do you deal with these non-compliant human operators? And that's the problem we believe we have now solved.
You're going to make the world a better place. You pointed out something earlier, which is really interesting, which we take for granted today. The system can predict weather solutions. I'm reading a book now on Ernest Hemingway's time when he lived in Key West. And there was a hurricane that came in, and everybody in Key West on a one-day delay because the newspaper has to come down from Miami, and Hemingway wants to tie off the boat because it's all he cares about. Can't sink the boat pillar. Nope, can't do that. Got to take care of the boat. But they're having this big delay in time of figuring out the weather, and it turns out it was the worst hurricane ever to hit the continental United States, and it was a massive delay there. Your system is able to pick up weather in real time? Is that what you're describing? So we don't have a situation where, I got to get the app open to see if it's going to be windy or rainy today. Is your system constantly monitoring the weather in real time?
The total system is, not the onboard vehicle system. We do sense the conditions on the vehicle, but in addition to that, we enable what we call oversight. So we have a central system that is monitoring environmental conditions as well as other traffic conditions over the horizon, beyond where the truck can perceive. That provides an additional bubble of safety for the vehicle. And the hurricane analogy is perfect. I really like that. Hurricanes used to kill many because there was no weather service that was forecasting weather and saying, hey, in 3 days, you're going to be, overwhelmed with a Category 5 hurricane. We do that in the oversight system. So as the trucks are rolling, if we have 100 trucks driving down a lane, and we know that, in the next state there are tornado warnings, we can command those trucks to safe conditions long before they get into the tornado warning area. And because at scale, we have to manage where all those trucks go, this oversight gives us the ability to say, okay, truck number 2, you go to this pullover. Truck number 3, you go to this parking lot. Truck number 4, you take an alternate route. We have that ability from oversight to be able to manage the set of autonomous vehicles in a way that, number 1, they don't drive into the bad weather areas, and number 2, they don't, we don't have 100 trucks overwhelming one rest stop trying to find a place to pull over. So we can coordinate across the set of autonomous vehicles.
It's a game changer. And further on in the story of Key West, on the old Flagler, Florida East Coast Railways, they had to send a train down doing 2 miles an hour from Homestead, Florida, which is the southernmost tip of Florida before you get to the Keys, to rescue them. And a tidal wave came and the poor people perished. Your system avoids that scenario. So you're sitting there and you're studying history and saying, okay, we're not going to have this incident again. We're gonna make the safest, most efficient product. That's game changing. Since you're looking at weather from your oversight system, I'm sitting here just reading this wonderful book, and you're telling me that, okay, we've learned from history. Why is the weather aspect not talked about enough since it plays such a significant role in what you're looking to accomplish with TuSimple?
There's so many things to talk about in autonomy, but it is one that is very important. Not only do we have to understand what's happening around the vehicle, and the vehicle system is designed to understand if it is getting into conditions that it should find a pullover, a minimum risk condition, we call it. But for example, high winds. A truck is basically a rolling billboard, as you can tell when you see them. People advertise on them. But that billboard has a very large surface area. And if you have a crosswind, you're exerting a tremendous force on the vehicle system. And that's why we had to spend a substantial amount of time in vehicle controls, understanding how to deal with sudden, very strong lateral forces applied to the vehicle, such as from an instantaneous large gust, like from the plow wind of a thunderstorm, preceding a thunderstorm. These things can be strong and violent. We've encountered 50 mile an hour direct crosswind gusts in Arizona ahead of massive thunderstorms. And the vehicle holds its lane better than a human driver. Human drivers are generally, there are guidelines, there are tables human professional drivers follow. Schneider publishes one that many follow that say, with an empty trailer, if the winds exceed 35 miles an hour, you need to get off the road. And then as the weight increases, depending on the CG, as the weight increases, you might be able to handle larger crosswinds. But when you get into the 35 mile an hour range, you're starting to get pretty heavy control inputs. You get up to 50, you're in really significantly dangerous conditions for a truck. We have definitions around when a truck will pull over for crosswinds, but we also have found that our control system is far more accurate and powerful than a human driver in the face of crosswinds.
Is this where the 5.5 million miles of real on-road data comes in as you develop the system? You've seen all sorts of things that I've probably never seen, and you're like, wow, that happened today? Is that where that on-road data makes a difference? Because anybody could come up with a video game and come up with an idea, but you're actually on the road experiencing that. Is that is the real 5.5 million miles of on-road data enhancing the system as you prepare to develop and deploy the world's safest driver?
Absolutely. And we published a safety framework that talks about the role of data in our overall comprehensive safety case. Data provides us the ability to understand what happens in the real world immediately and statistically. It allows us to better understand the kinds of non-compliant drivers and allows us to understand the occurrence frequency of rare events. So, for example, how frequently do you find a sofa lying in the middle of the highway? We now have sufficient data to give you a real answer to that that's statistically grounded. Same for wheelchairs and people crossing an interstate highway in dark clothing. We've seen all of these, and we know how frequently this happens generally. As we collect data, we reinforce that statistical understanding of the world. It allows us to compare our real experience to the statistical evidence. So we can say, yep, the things we're actually experiencing in this validation are at the frequency that we expected them based on the very large amount of data. The data also trains our system in very important ways. Our system is an AI stack both at the perception level and at the planning level and at the prediction level. So these various levels use data to refine their behavior over time. So, for example, we have certain routes that we execute that have trouble spots that have been troublesome for years. Bad intersections or commercial locations like gas stations where people tend to jump out in front of you. We see that in the data, and over time, our vehicle system understands that in this location, be careful. This is a dangerous location. Be careful. So not only can we use it in the training of our system learns the routes, to a deeper and deeper level over time, but we also use the data to understand what the long tail really means. Where does it converge? And that helps us understand better when the vehicle is ready. Simulators are important, but they're not the only thing, and they're not the better thing. We simulate at the controls layer, we simulate at the behavioral level, and we simulate at the perception level. We have full, realistic, visual simulators that we use with our perception system. We have behavioral simulators that we use to test the vehicle, the functional behaviors of the autonomy stack. And we have low-level control simulators that test vehicle dynamics and those levels of behavior. All of these are important, but it doesn't replace and can never replace actual road experience and the data that's collected from that. And we think that anyone that says you can do it all in simulation has not dealt with a traffic swarm like we have, has not dealt with some of the really crazy stuff that you just wouldn't dream up in a simulator.
The same analogy could be said for rock climbing. If you're going to be a solo climber without ropes, you have to go learn the routes with ropes to understand the nuances of going up the side of the mountain. It's just, you have to do it. Very similar thing to what you're doing. Nothing can replace actually physically for your tires to touch the road, or for the rock climber's hands to touch the rock. You have to do it to become the best, and that's what you're clearly doing. The company, I read the framework, has a really big culture of transparency, but in the report you highlighted several times substantive safety. What is substantive safety, and what is TuSimple's approach to substantive safety?
So you touched on two things there. I'll talk your second question first, then I'll talk about transparency. Substantive safety is understanding your performance based on the data. And you must have sufficient data of actual road performance, of road situations, to understand how you comport against that. So we understand how good drivers drive. We understand how bad drivers drive based on the data. We understand what our system should be doing in the face of edge cases based on the data. We can then test our vehicle system against the data. So not only how are we doing in some theoretical scenario established in a simulation, but how are we doing over time against the data, against human drivers, against autonomous drivers. That's what the data gives us. It gives us an ability to compare directly at a statistically valid level. And that's something that, we can create theoretical situations, until the cows come home. That doesn't mean that those actually reflect the reality. You could say academically it's correct, but we can prove it where the rubber meets the road, as you will. Now, in terms of transparency, in 2018, we made a conscious decision after our first encounter with a partner showing our technology that we needed to educate the public on the power of autonomy and on the advancements that are being made in autonomy. Because in order for us to succeed as a business, we needed to have public acceptance, not just from the carriers, but also from the general public. So we made a decision in 2018 that if a credible reporter came to us and said, I want to do a story on you, we would say yes as a policy. And we started getting reporters coming to us. And we knew that we would be exposing not only the great stuff, but the trials and tribulations of active development. We would not always be perfect. And we knew we had to take that risk in order to be honest with our public. So we did that. And the very first story that went out was in Wired magazine. And in fact, we had a hardware failure during the demo, and they wrote about it in the article. But it was generally positive. And we felt, well, okay, we took a little hit there, but it was early in development, and we were able to demonstrate the power of autonomy. It became easier over time because we got used to being able to talk publicly about what we were doing. And then one day 60 Minutes called, and we said, uh-oh, this is big time. Do we really want to do this? And we actually spent about 6 weeks debating internally. But in the end, we said, this is our policy. And they are, the kings of investigative reporting. We have nothing to hide. They can investigate away, and we're happy to show what we're doing. But we knew that they would try to come in, with they'd do something because they're 60 Minutes. And it ended up being a tremendously positive experience. And they did dig. They dug in. They spent time with us. They looked at everything we did. They, turned over every stone in our company. And in the end, it was a great experience. And we were the only autonomous vehicle company that said yes to them. And so we were quite proud of that.
You're pulling back the curtain to build trust and acceptance with the public. And that's key. As a truck goes down the highway, the mom or the dad, the individual driving that truck wants to know that, okay, this truck is safe, and you're doing that. I want to point out on 60 Minutes, this is me, I think you did one thing more brilliant than anything. Everybody had a safety vest on that was in or around the truck, and I picked up and then I said, okay, the culture of safety. And then I've noticed press photos that have come out after that and continuously to come out, individuals have the safety vest on, the bright neon green safety vest. Does that stem from a culture of safety where you're not cutting corners and you realize safety is not just a buzzword for TuSimple? Safety is something that's fundamental to the core of the company.
It is fundamental, and this started very early. We have articulated internally our cultural values, and the first one is safeguard. And it's not just functional safety of a vehicle, it's operational safety, and it is measured in every department. So accounting is measured on how they safeguard our data. IT, same thing. So every single employee in the company is measured. In fact, it is the very first element in our quarterly performance reviews is safeguard. What did you do to enhance the safety in your job? And we have it's a serious criteria for every employee. But in our operations in Tucson, where the safety vests abound, we made a decision very early on that we would take care of the little things. There's a sort of a well-known, you can Google it, concept called the broken glass policy, where you fix the little things. It's, cities manage against this. They say, take care of the little things, and the big things will become more apparent. If you're walking down a street and it's filthy and you've got like a piece of trash, you're probably going to throw it on the street and contribute to the trash. But if that street is spotless, you're going to wait and hold that piece of trash until you get to a trash can. It just changes behavior. So in Tucson, not only do we have safety vests, if you're on the operational floor, you have to be in a safety vest. And you're called out if you're not. Somebody will come and pull you off the operations floor and say you need to have a vest. But we also clean the place constantly. So we have a team that is scrubbing the floors constantly. Engineers and technicians are told to clean up after themselves, to clean as you go. The place is spotless, and that's intentional because it encourages a culture of doing things right. And then when you have a big thing, it's really obvious. You see a mess and you go, hey, something's wrong here, and people respond. So we're very happy with our culture.
You have the culture of doing right that values safety. I want to repeat, value safety. Is that when UPS says, okay, TuSimple, we're looking at your tech, and wait a second, this culture values trust, it values safety, and it values transparency, it meets our goals. Is that what some of your partners are looking at as you expand the AFN, looking at the culture of TuSimple? Not only are you building really great technology, but you have a sustainable culture?
Yes, it does have an impact, and we have made a part of our introduction process to the company. We bring our partners to our operations facility so that they can see how we operate. so they can understand we're not just a startup in a garage just slapping things together with duct tape. In fact, I banned duct tape as one of my first actions in the company, although it sneaks in every once in a while. But we banned duct tape as a solution. But we bring these partners in, and we invite their technical teams and their operations teams and their safety teams, and we ask them to come and judge us. And sometimes we learn. We've invited partners in that have looked at what we're doing, given us kudos for where we've gone, and then made suggestions for improvement. And we'll take those suggestions. We really value that.
TuSimple, you have great partners. You have McLean Foods, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway. You have Penske. I've highlighted UPS. You have US Express. And now you've got this new partnership with DHL. That's really impressive. How did you score the DHL partnership? And will the trucks become yellow to match the DHL branding eventually?
Well, we'll do whatever we can with paint that'll get the trucks moving. I have no problem with yellow paint, unless it's a UPS truck, and then we'll probably use brown paint. But we'll worry about paint later. DHL is an example of the maturity of our company. 2 years ago and 3 years ago, we were doing pilots here and there, trying to prove to people that this stuff can work. And when you're early and you're trying to establish yourself, you start with a pilot. But you have to move beyond that, because you don't make money doing pilots. Pilots are a way to try to get your foot in the door. We did that years ago now, and that what established our UPS contract and partnership. We've now matured that one to the point that we can now say, with that and with McLean and with others, look at our performance. Look at what we're doing for these companies. Look at our on-time performance and the traditional measures that these carriers apply to their partners. And we're meeting and exceeding. We're one of the best contract carriers for UPS. We're the best with all of our partners, and we're proud of that. So when we bring a new company in, like DHL, they can see our track record. They can see what we're doing, and they can say, yes, that's a partnership I want to be a part of. That helps me for my future, helps me advance technologically, and they're a great logistics partner. So we have gone beyond. We've essentially de-risked ourselves as a business partner. So we no longer have to prove ourselves with pilots. Now, I'm not saying we won't do more pilots. As we advance the technology and we hit new plateaus in our achievement, we will demonstrate those new plateaus with pilots. But then we have now a track record of long-term, successful contractual relationships that allows us to accelerate and to do that with many other partners.
The contractual deployments are becoming obvious because the AFN expanded from Dallas to Orlando. I sit back here, okay, the business is growing. Now you're from Tucson, Arizona to Orlando, and hopefully we'll get you to Southern Florida at some point. But to me, just looking at that, the business is expanding. Why was Orlando chosen as the next expansion of the AFN from Dallas?
So with our many partners, we have been privileged to work with them to do route analysis, to understand where does freight actually move? Where does it move with our partners? What are the best routes for our partners? And the answer came, we are going to continue east into Florida. That particular route happens to be a very dense corridor of freight movement. And many of our partners said, yes, we want that. So that's what we've enabled. And that's what we're taking on with this new route, is an opportunity with multiple partners to move large volumes of freight and really expand our business.
We've talked about the autonomous freight network from different aspects of it, but for a listener who might not be familiar with the term AFN or autonomous freight network, how would you describe it at a high level?
At the highest level, you could think of the autonomous freight network as a virtual railway. We're defining with our autonomy, which is a map-based system, we're defining a network of networks, if you will. So we're defining a base layer of routes, a network of routes interconnected, which carriers can use to operate their fleets, their autonomous fleets. So each carrier that's moving freight, each logistics entity that's moving freight with their own trucks, has their own internal network of lanes or routes that they use. We have an underlayment of autonomous lanes that integrate with those routes for each carrier independently. So just like the internet is a network of networks, where there are many sort of hub environments, nodes through which many companies' networks traffic travel. That's the nature of the AFN. You can think of it as a railway network, or you can think of it as the internet for transport. It is a facility that allows a carrier to overlay their network onto this autonomous infrastructure that allows them to move their freight the way they move it today, but in an autonomous fashion, with all of the protections that the oversight that we provide, the over-the-horizon weather, the rescue services, and others apply to this network with their fleet of vehicles.
I'll put it this way. From a consumer perspective, you're going to shore up a supply chain. If they order an item online, it'll get to their house efficiently instead of this 1, 2, and 3 week delays that we're currently experiencing. It's good for your carrier partners, but it's also good for the consumer that's ordering the goods. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, it's ultimately going to be good for the consumers. There's no question. We're more efficient, and that means that we're faster. So today, if you were to move goods from California to Florida, or California, West Coast to East Coast, and you needed it in 2 days, you're going to put it on an airplane. If you have an autonomous trucking network, you can put it on an autonomous truck and it'll get coast to coast in 2 days. Today it takes a week or more to get it coast to coast. And that means that goods are moving into truck transport, which is much cleaner than an airplane and cheaper than an airplane. So we improve sustainability, and consumers get their goods at the same speed or faster, much more cheaply.
Thank you for highlighting the cleaner aspect. I believe at some point in the future, you're starting to see it now in Evian water bottles, and it says that this is a recycled bottle. This is a carbon neutral bottle. At some point, you'll have, when you order online, you'll have a shipping option. Would you like the most environmental friendly way to ship this? And that could be on an autonomous truck. So that's a thing that we're coming to at some point in society. Whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm not sure, but that's something that I believe that will be an option. And looking to the future, how do you see the autonomous trucking industry evolving as a whole, and what role do you feel that TuSimple will play in that evolving industry?
We're very excited about what's coming forward in the vehicle platforms themselves. There are initiatives for battery electric, for hydrogen, for various modes of powertrain that are far more sustainable than diesel. We embrace all of those technologies, and the autonomy is, I would say, relatively agnostic to each powertrain type. There are adjustments to be made, of course, from type to type. But the real advantage we have with the autonomous freight network is, as these new modalities come to the fore, we can optimize their use with the autonomous freight network. We have capabilities that we're building into the network to support new kinds of propulsion. And that will allow us to have this support structure in place as these new modalities come online.
Well, it will allow TuSimple to scale. I give you a lot of credit for looking to the future and understanding where the industry is going and where society is going. And Chuck, as we look to wrap up this super insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them?
I think first and foremost, this technology is no longer a science project. This is now moved to engineering, and it is coming. It's coming soon. And it is safer and more sustainable than other forms of transport. So we're very excited. It's coming soon. Stay tuned.
I'll sum it up this way, Chuck, and to our listeners. The future is autonomous, and the future is autonomous trucking, because today is tomorrow, tomorrow is today, and the future is TuSimple. Chuck, thank you so much for coming on SAE Tomorrow Today. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode featuring Chuck Price from TuSimple. Our next episode is coming to you on January 20th, featuring Kasser Jonas, co-founder and CEO of Applied Intuition, and Peter Ludwig, co-founder and CTO of Applied Intuition. Applied Intuition is doing wonderful things around software development to enable the future of autonomy. Please tune in because we hope you'll enjoy this episode as well.
SAE International makes no representations as to the accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. The information and opinions are for general information only. SAE International does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast.